Welcome. My name's Allan Holmes. I was Chief Executive of the Department of Environment, Water and Natural Resources, about to depart the stage. Welcome to Stirring the Possum, possibly for the last time. Hard to know, isn't it, whether there's a life after that. We'd like to acknowledge the Kaurna people as the traditional custodians and carers of the Greater Adelaide region, and that the place where we are meeting today is on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people. We acknowledge and respect the Kaurna people's relationship with country and their cultural and spiritual beliefs. For those that have been with us with Possum since the start, it goes back I think 10 years, probably a little bit longer. And we started this out as a public conversation series, a bit experimental. In fact, the very first one of these we had in the Benithan Hall over on North Terrace. And for those that remember that, Michael Leunig was our guest on that first night. The hall was full, we had 600 or 700 people, and the acoustics were terrible, I remember. And we learnt a little bit about that. And the other thing that I recall from that first night was that Michael gave me some wise counsel. He said, if you're going to have this sort of conversation, let's not have a debate, let's see whether we can have a dialogue. And we've stuck with that over that period of time. And the emphasis has been on the story and trying to encourage plain English, something that people can understand, yet not plain English in the sense of being uninteresting or lacking in beauty. So we have tried to find some elegance in the way we speak. We've also tried to find some enjoyment, perhaps some whimsy, a bit of curiosity. We've remained respectful, and hopefully we've provided some entertainment. In large part, I think we've succeeded because the feedback has been pretty good. And tonight we've come full circle. We have Michael back again, and the topic tonight is, I thought it was nature and the soul, but it's soul and the natural world, so close enough if you like. And tonight we're not trying to solve a problem. That's not the intention. It's much more of a reflective piece, a piece where we give you the chance to reflect on some ideas, and where it takes you, I don't know. It's a bit open-ended, this one. However, I would like to define the scope just a little bit, because soul and the natural world could be left pretty wide open. And there is one definition of soul, which is this notion of the immortal, the spiritual part of a person that's regarded as immortal. Now, I actually don't want to go there tonight, but you can if you like. Where I want to go is something more about a person's moral or emotional nature, their sense of identity. And that'll do me for soul for tonight. And probably go one step further and say the essence of a person. What is it that's at the essence of being you, of being me? With nature, however, I don't want to be as precise or as restrictive, if you like. Nature's such, or the natural world's such a challenging one. I'm not talking about something that's in its untouched state. That's not where I am. I'm happy to talk about the outside world, if you like, but that bit that's natural. So it's the outside bit that's natural. So it's plants, it's animals, it's landscapes, it's geography, it's the sky. And I'd even include the stars and the moon in that. And when you put those two together, it's the impact that the natural world has on that sense of person, the sense of the individual, the sense of the identity of a person. Now, I know we've advertised this as being Michael Leunig's show tonight, but as I've been wandering the streets of Adelaide, I've encountered other people, and I've thought it might be good to add a little bit more colour to tonight's proceedings. So, first of all, I met James Darling at his exhibition out on Portrush Road. If you're interested, James has got an interesting piece of sculpture. I think I perhaps should call it an installation at Hugo Michel's gallery if you're interested. And so I'll start with James. James, I don't really want to categorise people, but to give you a little bit of background about who they are, I thought James had come to a Stirring the Possum, had been on the stage at a Stirring the Possum previously, but he tells me that I dreamt that, so I still think you did, James, but it probably was a dream.
Premonition.
So James is a farmer, he's a sculptor, he's a photographer, he's a writer, and he's a good friend. So that's James. Sophie's even more difficult to describe. Sophie, I could start with saying Sophie's a full-time mum, 5 kids between 7 and 13, and that's a pretty impressive thing to be, a full-time mum or a good mum. James and Michael don't qualify, they're old fathers really, their kids they've long gone. Well, not entirely, have they, Michael? Your kids are still with you. The second lot are, aren't they?
Yeah.
So Sophie is better known, of course, as a TV presenter on the ABC gardening show, horticulturalist, gardener, community activist, and involved in lots of community activities. Pretty special person, and also a friend. And then I come to Michael, who you probably all know very well. He's described as a living treasure, which is better than being described as a dead treasure. And he, again, Michael, you qualify as a farmer as well, don't you, in a sort of roundabout sort of way? Sort of.
No.
Cartoonist, artist, poet, author, and another good friend. And it's great to have you, the three of you, with us tonight. And you know the drill. So the panel will speak, then we'll have a conversation, and then the audience will participate. And the rules around the audience participation are that you've got to keep your comment or question very brief, because it doesn't work if you do otherwise. So don't think that I'm rude when I cut you off after a very short period of time. So that's how we're going to run. And I'm going to invite Michael to kick off tonight. I don't know where you're going to start.
Sounds like a football match. You have invited me here, Alan, and I didn't push myself forward. I come somewhat timidly. As I get older, I'm not sure that I've got much to offer that you don't know, like in terms of if I talk to you. The things I might talk about in this short time, you probably already know, and you probably know more than I do. But I'm here just to offer some very personal reflections. And as I say, this funny business of, this natural business of getting older is a lovely sort of a lightening off, letting go of what you know, I find, whether it's deliberate or it just happens. So it can be enjoyable nevertheless. Look, as I came here today, there's always a little omen or two when you're coming to an event. There's a look out for something, it'll tell you about what you should talk about. Over the freeway in Melbourne, as I came to catch an airplane, there was a sign advertising a big motorcycle event. And it had a picture of a man on a motorbike at an extraordinary angle going around a bend. And the words were, defying the laws of nature. So I thought, yes, that says a lot. And I could talk about that. But then just as I came here tonight, past the zoo at the university, there were 2 ducks on the ground. And I stopped and I spoke to them. And they were sort of, indigenous kind of ducks. And they said hello back, and everything was rectified. You know, I forgot about the man on the motorbike. And I thought there are two omens. Look, this thing of defying nature is seen to be such an achievement, and I don't know why it is. And all my life it's bewildered me. And as it bewilders me why people who seem to love nature or call themselves greenies are becoming increasingly derided as some sort of irrelevant, soft-headed people who don't know about the real world. And this rather distresses me as a political line, I see. It's an insult to call someone a greenie. I don't have much theory on that. I just note these things with some dismay and this conquering of nature, and we know about the sadness of all that and what it's done to us. But it lingers, and it's becoming very strident in some circles that this is a sign of some weakness and irrelevance. And what more can I say to that? We've become alienated on, it seems, I mean, we're talking now about something called nature deficit disorder in children in parts of the world, and it seems pretty evident to me that things like television are much more attractive than nature to children who are confined to urban areas, and it's very sad to me, and what is lost in that. I'm also conscious that there are places in the world where they're starting to heal people with nature. I think in Japan has made a lot of progress in that area, and people are go into forests and remain in forests to settle themselves down and deal with these common ailments of depression and anxiety and general loss of identity. People in Japan also, it seems, are going to forests to finish their lives, to commit suicide, choosing a forest as a place they want to depart. A sad thing. Also in Japan, I think there's a type of therapy of resting people by a tidal river and exposing them to the comings and goings of the tides, the night and day. Just natural cycles, simple exposure, prolonged exposure to it. So these are just observable factual things of which I'm not an expert, but I take note. And then there's this business of the soul, of which I'm not an expert, and nobody is. We heard our grandparents talk about it, or our great-grandparents talked about it with ease, I think. Nowadays it seems to be a slightly more embarrassing subject, and it's a sure sign of being off with the pixies or something to talk about it in some circles, and I think that's a big pity. I don't think one has to be profoundly religious or theologically religious to use that word, and it's an enjoyable word, and I think it refers to something. And what it refers to, well, we'd have our own ideas about it, but what did our grandparents mean? What did our ancestors mean? And I don't know, I'm not a scholar of the soul, but in my lifetime I've come to feel that it is something profound. It's the link, it's the bridge into nature. It's the part of us that is not disconnected from nature, that yearns to be connected to nature in some way. And I think it is our one chance to really link to nature, just simply to know that it's going on. Even though our conscious lives, our lives of ambition and ego and, aspiration and the day-to-day banalities and stresses, that somewhere there's this aspect which is not of this material world, and it is there within us and or around us. Who knows where it hangs out. But it seems to be the calling, the part of us that is the real, that bit of us that is not recognised in the world, perhaps. I'm just conjecturing here. It doesn't quite belong in this material, human-centric world. We are so, the narcissism of humanity, it's all about us, isn't it, you know, and the newspapers are so much about us and the celebrities and the human consciousness and all that, but there's this other part of humanity which is rather divine, if I can use that difficult word also. And I think it's very real, and it's the bit that senses nature, that yearns, that suffers, that turns our experience into some sense of meaning within us, which is very individual. Who knows? I love the mysterious dimension of it. It's a wonderful mystery we carry, and it's a very redeeming aspect of humans, I think. But so denied. I think we're so in denial. Some people are very phobic about it, the word, the idea. And I think we might just loosen up, because I think it is nature. I think soul is where we are, nature. And we talk of human nature, and I think it's a lovely idea that we are carrying nature within us, and we are part of the ecosystem at this point. And that there is an ecosystem which we are part of, whether we like it or not, and we have a responsibility to let it become part of that ecosystem and be careful of it, as we must be careful of the broader ecosystems. And I've mentioned this before in public places. This lovely book by Rachel Carson, I think in the 1950s, The Silent Spring, where it was observed that the use of DDT was causing the loss of bird life, and the spring was becoming silent and the bird song was disappearing. And they didn't know. In good faith, they'd been using this agricultural miracle, and they'd been killing this kind of ecosystem. And I think humanity started to see that ecosystems are fragile, and they die and become distressed. I have a view that that ecosystem of which we are part is also something that is in trouble. And we better look after that part of self, look after soul. And I think we're not looking after it. We are humanity. I'll stop in a moment. I'll get lost in this, but it's, and I don't want to be just sad, because look, the joys of nature are self-evident. But this bit about where we connect to it, and what are we doing to that link to nature? It's not just about looking after nature. We've got to look after ourselves and look after that soulful part which is the link. And I think it's a delicate ecosystem. I think we dump more into it than we know. We think we can take it. Modern humans regard themselves as omnipotent, strong. We have science and knowledge and method and systems by which we can overcome nature. And yet, the plagues of depressions and anxieties and people falling apart is evident and very sad. So my theory is, we have to find ways to acknowledge and look after the soul if we are to rejoin nature and become part of it. That is the point where we link to nature.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Now we're going to jump straight to James. James has got a short piece as well, and so it's another bit of introspection, if you like. So James.
Thank you. I have called this the country of my soul. I write in the dead of night while others dream. When Allan asked me at the opening of Sign of the Times at Hugo Michel Gallery on September 4th if I would agree to speak at his last Stirring the Possum about nature and the soul, that's what he said, I said I did know something about nature, farming for more than 35 years in the upper southeast of South Australia between Keith and the Coorong, inevitably involves working with nature, years of floods, an immolating bushfire, a number of droughts, seasons of plenty. I could claim some knowledge of the implacability of nature, but the soul was an entirely different kettle of fish. But my hesitancy about the temerity of the word soul is tempered by the acknowledgement that in a recent unpublished work entitled Nature is Not a Background, Art, Design and the Australian Landscape, there is a pivotal sentence about Duck Island, that addictive stretch of land which I first encountered as a teenager half a century ago, and which has been my home ever since 1976, which says, I am mindful that the country of my stewardship, the country of my soul, may always mean, has always meant more to others. While I was referring to the richness of association of an imagined indigenous occupation long before white settlement, it was the concept of the country of my soul that grabbed at my throat. How had I let those words pass as if unimpeded, as if without critical review, words whose poetry and presumption had every right to come back and haunt me? It takes me back to boyhood, adolescence, when that reaching for soul was integral to the literal amazement of discovering the world, not instructed, not educated, but the flowering of perceptions that sung with the fervor and shock of day-to-day revelation. No wonder the grown-up world is inevitably battered and adrift on the oceans of the adolescent, and that communication between generations is so frequently fraught. Like Plato's doctrine of recollection, that first primal grasp, who you might be and what the world might be, has an immediacy that, if disregarded or downgraded, might never grace consciousness again. In moments of clarity, I endeavor to understand that sense of first sight, knowing, as a reluctant grown-up, that innocence and awareness is a lethal combination. Soul was a word used sparingly in my family. I do recall my mother asserting that those who attended classical music concerts must have soul. But even then, her assessment was qualified and conditional. I recall her response to my considerable objections to being forced to study Latin. It was good for my soul, she said, as if that was that, an end of topic. I am much happier with the ubiquitous vulnerability of spirit rather than the onerous journey of judgment that delineates the soul. I did find out during university years and those following that I was essentially Greek, meaning that an exuberant equilibrium of body and spirit were elemental building blocks, a demanding physical life and an exacting creative life, farming and art, and that character was destiny. My partner, Leslie Ford, and I make installation art. I say you can't leave art out of anything. Our farm is our largest work of art. Art is a function of life, just as it is a function of art to unleash the imagination and show the way, to find a direction, to inform, to reveal. On a Sunday last spring, I was in a small minivan hired by the Probus Club of Bordertown and Conniver. They had requested a tour of Duck Island. I had already had too many stops, done too much talking, and we were heading back for lunch down a stretch of road with bush on both sides that we call Highway 1, when I alerted the driver to stop. Stop! The smallest pair of malleefowl that I've ever seen had decided to walk together across the road. It was a sight to set the spirits soaring. For those who do not know the malleefowl, let me say they are unsung heroes of the Australian bush, iconic and unique birds, the only mound-building birds in arid land on the planet. Leslie and I have worked for many years with the support of Allan and his department through our cooperative environmental management agreement to preserve and enhance those most vulnerable, industrious, and wonderful birds. If ever there was a single creature that expressed the quiet tenacity and outrageous perspicacity of survival in the dry lands of our continent, it is the malleefowl. Every time I see a malleefowl, there is the privilege of the miraculous. How did you arrange that? Asked a Provost Club member as he was boarding the bus. There was no answer. Last year, spring was bountiful before rain cut off. I too had to brake on the rubble of the range road not far from Duck Island. Scrambling across in front of me was not one echidna, not two echidnas, but three echidnas, all in a line, all going as fast as their short legs and prickly stout bodies would permit. The female in front, waggling, wobbling, furiously ahead of the two boys who were after her. There is a spirit in nature that purges and reinvents, opens, lifts, forgives, and restores. Anyone who has experienced the ash and devastation of a bushfire and then has seen, after rain, the prolific regeneration of the Australian bush cannot but be affected. I will finish with two pieces of writing. The first from my last entry of my 49th journal, dated 24th of February 2014. It is the spirit that breaks all boundaries, that perpetuates and makes distinction, that delineates, sets apart, continues to live, defies ending, defies contribution, offers, gives, rewards. We don't know who we are. Each of us remains elusive to ourselves. The more we mean to make apparent, to describe, to anchor, the greater the flaws. The aspiration of reach and the reality of what might be grasped remain like dancing on a pin, ruthlessly separate. And still we fall in love, held taut, imagining a world that can bring us to account, fallible but forgiven, from one reprieve to the next, the mirror of an unwanted eternity. And the second is a ditty I wrote some 20 years ago for Keith the Eternal City, a review performed by the Keith Theatre Group and sung by a lineup of nuns who wondered if Penola was going to have a saint, what Keith might find as equivalent. Just for starters, we need some martyrs, or rather one would do. Just think the renown it would bring to our town. I quite agree, don't you? We need some assistance, the lions, for instance, stumps and a solid stake. A small ordeal, we'll sell hot meals and scones and tea and cake. With such a vocation, we'll need a location to suit a capacity crowd, a place for the choir right next to the pyre, an occasion to do ourselves proud. And when our mission has come to fruition, a spirit ascended to grace, on our knees we will pray and give thanks for the day of Keith's gift to the human race. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I mean, here's the really unfair bit, because James had plenty of warning, but Sophie's had none. And so what I said to Sophie was, look, Sophie, you don't have to prepare anything, because I know I haven't given you any time, but what I want you to do is to listen to Michael and James and then give your piece. So this is truly off the cuff.
I think this is the most nervous I've ever been. I've just listened to Michael's wisdom and James's eloquence, and I figure, well, I'm where the plain English comes in. So, if we talk about nature and the soul, to me they are so interconnected that I actually struggle with people that don't have a way of connecting with nature. Now, obviously for me it's with gardening, but it can be for being outside in nature. But I actually have some friends who don't have a relationship with nature, and I find it, I think that, well, I just can't understand it, you know. And I know that, you know, for some people it might be music or something. Now, I love music. Music stirs my soul too. But for me, being outside with plants, with nature, with any form of nature is my soul food. And there's been a number of times in my life where a good friend has actually pointed out to me, Sophie, how long since you've done some gardening? And because I'm quite neurotic, actually, if I don't have it. And when I was writing my first book, I was towards the end, and I had all these symptoms, and they were about to run me off for MRIs and all these sort of funny symptoms. I felt like I was permanently drunk. And in the end, a very wise friend of mine said, how long since you've done gardening? And I said, I haven't got time to garden. Don't you understand? I'm on a deadline. You know, it's me and the computer. We're living together, and that's all there is at the moment, trying to get this thing finished. And this person that just said, I think you need to take your shoes off and walk on some grass, right? I think you need to go and hug a tree. And it was like, I should know that, right? And do you know what? I did, and all those symptoms disappeared. They were about to do MRIs. It was stress. It was because I wasn't connected. I was writing about it, but I wasn't actually doing it. And so, you know, I'm involved with horticultural therapy, which, you know, just like we've got art therapy and all sorts of things, you know, horticultural therapy is so powerful. Do you know, if you're in hospital, if your room looks out on something green, you have a better recovery rate than if your room looks out on a grey, best a brick wall, you know. To me, it's just so obvious. You know, because I'm off the cuff, I haven't got stats, but there was an English study which came up with an RDI of gardening, they actually put it down to, but we could say being with nature is the same as gardening. So RDI meaning recommended daily intake, and it was 1 to 2 hours a day would prevent major chronic diseases, right? So, you know, some people think if people aren't into gardening and they hear me talking about, you know, I talk about the fact that we can save the world with gardening. And, you know, whether you're a caretaker of nature or you garden in your own backyard, I genuinely believe that we can save the world with gardening, but we've become disconnected from that. And I've had a situation today where I've been in 2 meetings, one with someone in their backyard, and their backyard has been done by a landscaper, and actually nature didn't really feature. Sort of did. I hope they're not here. It sort of did, but, you know, it was so structured, you know, and the person had seen my installation at the show, and they said, we're a bit concerned about the plant palette they're using, and we'd like you to come in and give advice. And, you know, it's amazing how we can still have backyards and we can have gardens, but they're not necessarily places that are nice. You know, we've actually lost touch with diversity. You know, we've gone for these monotonous monoculture, these Harvey Norman car parks in a backyard, the massive hard landscaping, and, you know, we've got the schmickest ever outdoor kitchen, mind you, and recently I did a display garden at the Royal Show, and it was called A Backyard for Kids, and I'm involved with the Nature Play movement, and it came about because I see lots of fabulous suggestions to go to the National Park, go to the Botanic Gardens, you know. The best thing for kids is just go to the Moreton Bay Figs out here in Botanic Park. You know, let them play on those roots, they're fabulous. But I find it fascinating how people are going out to do it and they realise they've actually got part of nature in their backyard. But they've paved the whole lot or put down fake turf. Someone sent me a Facebook post on the weekend and it said, real fake turf. It was an advertising slogan that, you know, I couldn't quite get that one. But so that we've forgotten that, do you know, if you just let anything happen in the backyard, you're creating a space for kids to connect with nature. So we've got these conditions, you know, the nature deficit disorder. Well, there's a heap of adults that are suffering from that too. It's not only about kids. And a whole lot of today's parents haven't ever had that connection with nature. So I felt inspired to create a display garden that would show people this could be a backyard. And so I was putting posts up on Facebook, and you know, most of the response was really good, but every now and again you'd get someone going, well, how do you cement the post in? You know, or how long will those red gum slabs last? Or we've actually, you know, anyway, common sense is not so common. So to me, nature, gardening, it's just part of me. And, you know, I'm a great person for signs, like Michael said. So, you know, for me, the sign can be that you just see a rainbow. My goodness. My heart swells if I see a rainbow. If I see a double rainbow, I think I'm going to win the lottery. But, you know, and, you know, in some of my stupid moments, I have tried driving just to see, you know, what happens as you keep driving, you know. But recently we have a little bird box by our front door and a little parter lot moved in. So I put the bird box up as an ornament. It was in my mum's house as a child, and a little parter lot moved in. And so to me, to watch this little fella taking, I presume it's the bloke making the nest, taking all the bits of straw in, and then the wife joins him. And typically for the last 2 years we get babies, and they come about November. And, you know, just seeing them right by our front door, these little heads squawking, and people think it's the sad thing is people come to our front door and they think it's one of those sensor doorbells. Because they get close and they start to chirp, right? And, you know, we couldn't possibly have anything living in our gardens these days, could we? So, but anyway, to me, gardening, nature, it is so important, whether it's with kids, you know, Michael talked about the television, you know, the statistics are that the average child has 4.5 to 5 hours a day of screen time per day. This is Australian child, as opposed to 2 hours of green time per day. Now that green time is when they're kicked out of the classroom, so I don't even think that's a real representation. Now, if one of the interesting statistics that Nature Play use is the fact that if you were a maximum security prisoner, you'd actually get 2.5 hours a day of green time. So we say how dreadful that is for a child, but do you know what? There's a whole lot of adults, right, that are sadly lacking in that green time. And I know, you know, we need screens and we need to work, but we need to have that connection, and, you know, there'll be less stress, there'll be less physical symptoms, and we'll be a healthier, happier society.
Thanks, Sophie. Thank you very much. So, James, Michael, the mystery. Mm. You know, if I think about the sight, the sound, the smell, and we actually often don't think about that. They're there. In a way, it is a bit of a mystery, isn't it? That imprinting, that connection with the brain.
I'm not sure I follow. You mean our being conscious of nature?
Yeah. So it was your point that human nature being part of, not even being conscious of those connections.
Well, yes, we're very oriented to knowing, you know, to know. And the scientific approach, and we have knowledge, and knowledge is power, etc., and things are explicit. And but to have a poetic grasp of life, a sort of a natural poetic grasp, it requires that you enjoy what is mysterious. And I'm not talking about Hollywood mysterious, I'm talking about the natural wonderment that every child knows of. In innocence, and I maintain we are all still innocent if we want to. You know, I call it mature innocence. It is there if only we will have it. And, you know, and most people do in reality. They're pretty good at it in some ways. But to see mystery as a nourishment rather than something that's bamboozling you. And I think it was Keats, John Keats the poet, who arrived at this idea of negative capability, the capacity to not know and yet enjoy, and to be engaged in something without tying it all up and knowing it scientifically, to actually this alive space, a creative space where we wonder and we're sensitive and yet not in control. So this is the creative space to me, and I think nature provides so much of that, and our nature, it's in us, but we repress it. We seek to always conclude and know and get it down and be in control. So that's what I mean by the mystery. I think the more mystery, the better. I just enjoy to not know about that bit of land, but to gaze or walk in it or touch it or smell it and say, what is that? What is this? Which I think is a great eternal question to carry. What is this? And so this is an engaged state, but not that imperial sense of I want to own this by knowing it and having some advantage over it by understanding it utterly. I suppose it's reverence, if you like. There's some devotional or reverential view. Who understands music? Who really understands what it is when it comes to us and makes us cry or makes us alive? You know, who understands that? I mean, maybe if it's just all chemicals in the brain, I still wonder, well, why? So that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But so nature would seem to me to be that also full, not just what the botanist knows, and God bless the botanist, but I love them. But you know, the child who walks into the woods, or the mature innocence that stands and looks at it and lies and sees a meteor, etc. What does that activate in us? Why aren't our politicians, don't they seem to be like that? Why do they seem and so if I can come back, I'll just wander a little away, hearing this thing, how do you get people connected, and what is the consequence of this disconnection, say in our political life, where I think it sort of matters at this particular point in history too. What is the consequences of this kind of disconnected state, this dumbness, if you like, this kind of just disconnection, and a story came to mind. I was in North Queensland in a remote community, Indigenous community called Lockhart River, and I was staying there for some time, and a woman came through. She was an artist, and she was from Melbourne, and she was briefly there, and this is an old Indigenous man who was painting something or other, and she said, "Oh, you people, you just have this connection to nature and the land. You know, how could I ever have that?" And this old fella said, "Oh, maybe you should go out in country and just sleep on the ground." He said, "Sleep on country, just one night." And I thought, how wise is that? He was offering a starting point for someone, a very practical piece of old-fashioned advice. Just go and sleep on the ground one night. And I think it's a terrific start. And I do it every summer. I do it a few times, you know, as much as I can. Go out in the paddock. Something happens. A mystery. I don't understand it. Getting back to the mystery. Something's enlivened and comes to life, or is revived at least.
Could a malleefowl have replaced a duck, do you think?
Of course, yeah.
So I was fascinated by James's description of the malleefowl, this extraordinary bird. James, it obviously means a great deal to you, doesn't it?
Malleefowl?
Yeah.
Certainly.
And the mallee root?
Yes, indeed. And in our earliest artworks our installation artworks that we were somehow became known for were works where we went, Leslie and I, into the bush at Duck Island, and we chose to build a replica of one moment of a particular nest. And we did that with mallee roots that we had conserved from more than 20 years earlier, because we considered in our enforced land clearing, I might add, in the late 1970s, that our sandhills were fragile and that we wouldn't drive any machinery over them that we didn't have to, and we picked all our ground and we sorted our mallee roots from any other unwanted timber, mostly stringy bark and that sort of thing, and we burnt the unwanted timber. But as we were unloading these separated mallee roots, the piles became bigger and bigger, and then we built a wall so we could throw the mallee roots over the wall, and then we built edges and sides, and that became... Calm, everyone.
I didn't know I was switched on. Sorry, Jim.
That became our first installation artwork with mallee roots. And we have built artwork around the world, in Paris a number of times, in Madrid, in Singapore, in Japan, in Finland. Everywhere we go, you can't build with mallee roots without talking about the environment. Our works make social, political, and environmental statements. We were actually most privileged to go to Finland first, where, of course, there is a love affair with wood. And their sense of wood is, of course, polished and refined and elegant. And they had never seen something as rough, abrasive, spiky, unpredictable, tough, hard, dense as a mallee root. And we made the angles and textures of sand. And let me say, when you make an artwork and you're thinking of this question that Allan asked Michael about mystery, an artwork is moving into unoccupied space. But when you make the work, the end product somehow is not successful unless it is beyond what you imagined. And the critical thing for the artist is to participate in this sense of the unknown, the revealing, the mysterious, and, as Michael said, to value it as the essence of the thing that you were striving for in the beginning.
Thanks, James. Thank you very much. Sophie, most of us know you best for the gardening thing, I guess. And the thing that strikes me about the people that present on Gardening Australia with you is that there's something special about each of them and their connection with plants, gardens, the place. There's an innocence and a vitality about them that's what is conveyed. And I don't think it's made up. I think it's real. What is it? Where does that come from?
It's nice to hear that, because we're often called the gardening dags, comparatively. I just find, and I'm sure all my colleagues, because actually when we get together we talk plants and gardening. What else would you talk about? And we get fired up. I think all of us are totally inspired by nature, and
But there's something childlike there, though, isn't there? You know, there is an innocence about them.
well, it's the wonder. You know, you just look at plants. Plants are awesome. You know, every creature is awesome. But for many people, if they're not gardeners, I think we've actually become, I was thinking, listening to Michael talk about the mystery, maybe we're so obsessed with having to understand everything that when we can't understand nature, we get scared of it. So we're scared of trees. So we don't put trees in gardens, you know, or we're scared of spiders. So I build an insect hotel, and the comments I get is it would attract snakes and spiders. Or I actually had a discussion about the fact that we go out at night with torches looking for spiders, because I love to see the golden orb, you know, see how extraordinary is that, you know, to see the web a golden orb weaves. And when I talked about this on radio, the person that was interviewing me just said I was weird, which I probably am, but you know, I just think it's that every time you see anything, it is inspiring. I mean, before, when we're looking at, and we're looking in the tree line, you know, every leaf is amazing, and just looking at every leaf feeds our soul. You know, every insect, you know, the fact that an earthworm is 8 years old, right? That's awesome.
It's a funny thing, the thing around fear, isn't it? That, you know, you wonder whether the fear of the dark, the fear of the night is a natural thing, or is it? Because as you say, when you go outside at night, the sky, the stars, the moon, which we don't experience much anymore, are, you know, most extraordinary thing.
I do, and it's interesting because the three of us up here are all in rural or hills environments.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's very easy to become connected when you've got space around you, and it's a lot harder if you're on the third floor apartment with a tiny little balcony. So, however, if you're on the third floor apartment with a tiny little balcony, you've probably got the opportunity to walk through a beautiful park on the way to work, and you can find stuff that's inspiring anywhere. You know, I was showing last night a picture of a lacewing that I took in Christie Walk, right? So, you know, tiny little bug this big, Christie Walk in the middle of the concrete jungle. There's a little eco-sustainable development, and I'm in there and I see a lacewing, so I took a photo of it and I was using it to show people what a lacewing looks like. So, you know, the stuff's out there.
Well, from the 9th floor of my building, I see the peregrine falcon that nests on the top of the SA Water building.
Wow.
Most days. So in our city, there's a peregrine falcon. I see it hunt, and you know, so nature is there. There's the great Steve Earle song about the red hawk in New York. You know, it's yeah. Okay. Should we go to the audience at 6:30? We probably should. So we've got a few microphones, haven't we? So roving mics, and I'll have to put my glasses on because I can't see very far. And so, you know the drill, we've got to keep this nice and brief. Comments, so I'll let you pick where you're going to go. In the middle here. Yeah, it'll come on.
As a child, one of 6 from a single income family, the 2 highlights were trips to the beach, which were free, and trips once a month to Belair National Park, which was free. I'll try and stay in control because I'm very committed to this issue, but when they started to charge, I was sad. But they had an honour box, and I thought, well, grandparents and families that don't have a lot of money could probably just keep driving through and no one would notice. And then they had the boom gate, but it wasn't always manned, and I noticed a number of grandparents would get there before the boom gate and play at breakfast time and get out by 9:30, and then the boom gate would often not be manned from 4 o'clock, so you could get in there and have some time. And then they noticed that grandparents and people that didn't have much money were defying the system. So then they put a big sign up saying, if you're caught in the park, there's a $250 fine, on the spot fine, for enjoying this public space. And I felt sad again. And then this week I've had a story from a single mum who lives in the area who can't afford the $12 entry each time. She only lives around the corner from the park. So she went and talked to them about a year's membership, and then she rang Vinnie's up and asked for a month's food vouchers. And she said, Vinnie's are coming now to deliver the food because I decided that my child needed to go to Belair National Park and I couldn't afford it. So Vinnie's can feed us this month.
Okay, I get your point. Thank you very much. Got it. We do have to keep it brief, otherwise we won't get a chance. So in the middle.
Oh, good evening. I've got two things I'd like to say. Firstly, to Sophie, I really enjoy her presentations whenever I see her, and her children's garden. I think that's marvellous. And as a boy, our backyard was a sand pit under a pepper tree, surrounded by vegetable gardens, fruit trees and cows and chooks and things like that. Really marvellous way to grow up. To Michael, I've always been a fan of Michael's since about 1970-something. I really love his whimsical characters and points of view. But I'd like to ask him, were the ducks in defiance of anything?
Are the ducks, or were the ducks in defiance of anything? So an interpretation on those ducks.
I like this idea of their sort of defiance. I don't think they're conscious of this defiance. It's just they might, I think we're projecting that onto them. No, I think a duck just appeared in a drawing one day, as things just appear in drawings. You don't sort of think, oh, I've got an idea, I'll put a duck in. You just sort of, well, the drawing seems to call out for a duck. That's how it's and then it was just an enjoyable thing, and I became aware that I couldn't find a person on this earth who didn't sort of think favourably of ducks. And they don't have these pointy beaks, they're rounded and gentle enough sort of creatures and whimsical. But then, of course, later in life I found out I was sent an essay from one of Carl Jung's contemporaries explaining the archetypal significance of ducks in German folklore. And so it all gets very complex, but I just enjoy them, you see. But then they become too cute too. Everyone's, you must draw more ducks and draw more ducks. I'm happy to do that too. But no, the ducks are nice. They're just good. And I'm sure there's a duck expert here who says, no, they're more than nice, they're very complex. No, I had ducks, a lot of us had ducks, and they're worth, people write poems about ducks, and I don't know.
You need to know that Michael also has an interest in Jack Russell's.
But there is this idea, people eventually say, oh, it's the inner duck, or maybe that we all have an inner duck. And when you are lost, when you don't know what to do, just turn to your inner duck and it will waddle this way or that. And in fact, that is the archetypal significance. In Hansel and Gretel, the Hansel and Gretel can't get back home from the Wicked Witch. They come to a river, they're blocked. A duck appears and carries them across. And so it is in German mythology. The duck is a symbol of carrying you across the thing that's blocking your progress. It points to a way, it seems to. Maybe it's just joy, maybe it's happiness.
There you go. I do have to finish the one on the Jack Russells, because we do share the Jack Russells. Yeah. When Michael was in town 10 years ago, I was driving him back from the market, and we had Michael's kids in the back of the car, and we drove past one of those big stretch limousines, and one of the kids said, oh, can you imagine Pixies smoking a cigar in the back of the limousine? And I said to Michael, who's Pixie? And Pixie was the Jack Russell. Just imagine the Jack Russell with the big cigar. Yeah.
Hi.
At the back.
I'm an ecologist at UniSA, and in my world I meet a lot of self-interested people. I also take students on science camps in the wilderness, and spirituality is the realization that there's something bigger than all of us, and we achieve that in nature. And I think nature can fix the human soul at global level. And that's why we need to protect nature and functional ecosystems. And I would like everyone to pass on this message that, it's conservation and it's everyone's involvement that's going to achieve the soul fixing that is needed.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I just want to say it's been fascinating listening to you all, Michael, James, Sophie. You seem to complement each other really well. On a reflective nature, though, Alan, I'd like to hear a bit more from you in terms of, well, I guess, over your period at Juna, Denner, DH, what has been some of those soul-enriching moments for you? What have those been, those successes?
Look, it's a funny thing. People, well, if you read Hansard, Michael Pengilly said that I've done nothing for the state. In fact, I've stopped most things happening in the state. I disagree with Michael, but he's entitled to say that under parliamentary privilege. It's funny though, it's not, I've always thought that it's the interactions with people that matter most. It's what you do with people. Because inevitably that, if you want to conserve something, you've got to persuade somebody that it's worth doing, and it's those things that matter most. And I think about trying to influence people. So Michael told the story, which Michael's forgotten this, he can be forgiven, but when he first came here, the second time he came, it was to talk about that story of the woman that asked the man how to connect, and in fact we called that sleeping on country. And I remember the night before that we had a conference in town. I persuaded half a dozen people that attended the conference to come and sleep up on one of those hills out there. They thought I was mad, but they all came and slept out in the country. It was one of the most extraordinary things that I could do. So it's that stuff that I remember. It's trying to influence and affect the way people see and do things. And if you can persuade a politician, I've got faith in people. They let me down from time to time, but I think it is that. It's what you can do with people. Yeah. Over on the far side.
Good evening. As each day passes, my thinking and my speaking gets cruder. I want you to know that I married my wife in '77, and she didn't know the difference between a crow, call, or a galah. She was a girl born to a vet family in Murray Bridge. She didn't know the difference between a crow and a galah. She's changed. I've got sort of a statement and a question to ask. The statement is basically, many years ago I understood that it's attributable to Leonardo da Vinci, and he said most people here on this earth are here solely to consume and excrete, and to put it in common language, to eat and shit. There may be a question in that for you guys. The other question that I have, and I've thought about it, and if that is the case, and most people are here for that reason on planet Earth, to consume and excrete, then would a succession of world wars help us? Given that probably the last world wars didn't cause much damage to the forests of South America. Over to you guys. Thank you.
Michael, I reckon that's probably one for you, I suspect.
I wasn't sure was there a particular question or just a reflection on that? Is that what we're here for?
The reflection on Leonardo da Vinci saying, and all this. I understand it's true. Most people are here to consume and excrete, unfortunately. What do you think?
Well,
would world wars help us?
I think those human functions can be quite enjoyable. and there's nothing to be ashamed of about them. There's obviously more to it. What do we do between those moments? So I think it's a sign of good health myself. So that's as much. That was Leonardo on a bad hair day.
Thanks, Michael. In the middle here.
I've really enjoyed this. It's opened my head up a bit, and perhaps some other bits of me. And I just wanted to share what are perhaps some takeaway messages so far. I think I've got a working concept of soul, and I think it's what's left of me when you scrape, tear, chip away from me everything that differentiates me from you or anybody else. I think I'm more in touch with that when I'm in the bush or just on my bike and I see some cockatoos along the river, when I'm not in those things that don't make me feel good. And then I had a third thought, which was, well, if I got a soul, would I still have one if I was the only creature around? And I think the answer is probably no. So I think there's something about the connection for me.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a lovely reflection. Where to next? Over there, and in the front.
We keep talking about humans having souls, but I strongly believe that nature and wildlife should be included as well. Why do we have to keep ourselves as separate from the rest of nature? I see my cat or my dog, and because I know them well, but other animals, I'm sure when you look at the intricacies of what they do, I can't see, there's a gradation obviously from the very unintelligent invertebrates, but as we go higher, there's soul in lots of animals, I believe.
James.
I'd like to just share a little bit of what is the animist spirit. And of course, indigenous cultures are considered animist, that all of nature has its own particular spirit. When we went and built an installation in Japan, we built up the steps leading to a Shinto shrine. Shinto is animist. What we were hoping to achieve was a connection, amongst other things, between Shinto Japan and animist Australia. You might think that that was difficult. Normally, we built a wall, a wave, that was 25 meters long, that curved with the steps, that took the angles of the stone walls of the island and rose and fell to the height of 2 meters tall and 2 meters across. This was actually before the tsunami, so it hasn't done our future work in Japan any good at all. But normally, when we build in public places, the question that we get first asked is, what holds it together? And we say nothing. It is just, we just use the properties of the material. In Japan, the first question was, how old are the roots? And we were able to say that some of these roots were more than 450 years old. And they got the connection absolutely instantly. And the veneration for every part of nature, the rock, the root, the wind, the sky, all, and the human parts of nature, all of that is there and all of that is obvious.
Thanks, James. Thank you very much. Michael, do you want to add to that, or you?
No, there's something I'd like to say, but it doesn't add to that.
No, well, something.
Go off on a tangent.
Yes.
Tangents. Nature is full of tangents. That's mysteries. No, I was just reflecting while I was listening, and the tangent started up, and it was about the fact, and we've discussed this, Alan, that nature is easily talked about as beautiful, as inspiring, as a kind of great wonderment and joy and pleasure, but it is also for a human being, very dangerous. It also has a dangerous aspect. I had the good fortune to meet an old Indigenous man from the Kimberley region, David Muljali, someone took down some words and put a book out called Yoro Yoro, and in his language, Yoro Yoro referred to that spirit you talk about, of the spirit that runs through country, making everything stand up alive, was the translation of this Yoro Yoro. Lovely term. But David also said this other extraordinary thing. He said, and he was referred to his youth growing up in initiation and in the country of the Kimberley. He said, each day faces you like a murderer. And it seemed a shocking thing to say, but it was an enlivening way in which he meant it. He said, you have to know how to handle it. You don't underestimate it. It's not just pretty scenery. It's not gorgeous rivers and flowers and trees. It is being bitten by a king brown snake, and that's the end, or falling down a cliff, etc., etc. So it is so true that, but this doesn't mean we fear it because it is dangerous. It's that we live in correct relationship to it. And I'm reminded of what an extraordinary opera it is to live in the bush. It's a fantastic drama going on all the time. And where I live, the trees come down with great crashes, just 10 feet away from you, etc., and terrifying moments, and the great beautiful swarms of brown butterflies that come in about Christmas. It's an ever-changing cycle. So it's a fantastic show. It's an opera, really, if you like opera. And I don't particularly like opera, but I love the bush for this fascination, and to get up at 5 o'clock and stand there in the peace and hear that bird, and then that bird, and that bird, that different bird, that bird, and still the layering, and that one far away, and that one close by. I had this experience last year, and I started to cry. The music was so profound, and there's just tears came. I don't know whether they were tears of sadness, joy, whatever. And I thought, oh, I hope every music composition student sits in the dawn and hears this. I'm sure Mozart did. But things like that are so beautiful. And then there is bushfires, and if we had time...
Yeah, we do have time. Who's my man
if I could just show 2 little slides.
He's
the
asleep.
bushfire factor of Australia, which you know about, we know about. And the drama and the horror of that. We do have... Oh, yes. Now, I want to tell a story. Here's a little cartoon I drew in 1972 or something like this, crudely drawn. But I was down in some country, I think Alan came from.
Yeah, that's my country, this.
This is Alan's
Western
country.
Victoria, Tadioon.
And I was inspired by the local fire brigade. And this was simply a depiction of a fire that had swept through the landscape, and this is a brave little rural fire brigade, and all they've managed to protect is themselves. And there they are, surrounded, and they're exhausted, and they've put out, and the hoses are all burnt through, and it's the Bark Flat Fire Brigade. Now, I'll just add to this by saying there are times in my life when I've drawn cartoons where the thing depicted, the mysterious odd thing depicted, has come true in my life. They're like premonitions, and it's quite eerie, and it's quite scary. And I used to laugh about it and said, well, I hope that one never comes true. And if you would put the other one up, this is, I was involved in, this is my local fire brigade of which I'm a member. And last summer, there was a very big fire, and we got stuck. It was very rugged terrain and all those rocks you see, and we got stuck on a rock. The guy driving the truck put it up onto a rock, so we had no traction. And the fire swept around us and over us in quite a horrifying way, and I learned the meanings of radiant heat and smoke inhalation. And all our hoses were burnt. A few hoses were burnt, and I couldn't. And suddenly I remembered the cartoon, and that's I had run off. I was out pulling a hose out there, and it got burnt through, and I found my way back. And that's my phone camera, and I took a photo back of the other fellas there. I don't know whether it's very clear. Anyway, that too is nature, and all that dramatic day and all those helicopters and water bombers, all for naught, all in vain. The fire was much bigger than all of them.
Thanks, Michael, for that. In the front here.
That cartoon is one of my all-time favourites of yours, by the way.
Thank you.
One of the things about living in the city, you don't get to see much in the sky when you look up at it at night. And I think one of the things you can do, particularly with kids, is take them out into the country to a farm or the bush and get them to see what a real night sky looks like. And even better, if you can, get hold of a telescope so they can look at planets or the moon. And that's, I think, in terms of getting kids in connection with nature, I mean, I suppose it's more the universe, but universe is part of nature. I think that's a really good thing. And a question for Sophie. Do you get little bugs and put them in the spider webs when you go out and see them?
No, I don't.
Because I certainly do.
The whole process is extraordinary. So I love it.
They're
all.
awesome to watch them when you can watch them feeling the web and
I
the
do
twitches.
actually watch them do it. That's like being a voyeur, though. I have watched them do that. I haven't fed them.
They can tell the difference between a twig and a bug, and it's amazing.
They're amazing.
Okay, thank you very much. And just straight behind you, there's just there. Yep. Oh, sorry, go to the back first. Yep.
Yeah, great talk. Yes, I acknowledge the other speakers who say, yes, we are part of nature, not apart from nature. One thing that struck me as I was walking here and now is that we walk through Botanic Gardens. There's the Adelaide Zoo just on the other side of the glass over here. We're quite happy to love nature so long as we seem to have domesticated it and it's either safe, tamed or caged. I was just wondering if some kind of insight or viewpoint that one of you may have, because nature's pretty implacable if you meet it in the raw, and your soul may end up as so much predator poo.
James, I'll go there.
My word for nature is implacable. Nature is very much larger than all of us, but nature is smaller than we can possibly see as well. But the laws of nature, the momentum of nature, the movement of nature that we can influence slightly is so much larger than all of us. And I think the sense is to be part rather than to think that you are in control. If you're a farmer, right now we've had nearly 6 weeks, 7 weeks without rain. So we've gone through the end of the winter into the spring with no rain. If that, and considerably less than half our annual rainfall, if that continued through to the summer, it's going to be long, it's going to be difficult, and it will be testing on management, testing on animals, testing on the country, testing on everything. If you're involved with nature, you deal with that. You make your decisions. You try and do it early rather than be a victim of it. That's just the nature of the beast, and it's going to get more and more so. And what I say to people about nature is we have to expect the unimaginable. That is what we have done to our world, and we must open our imagination to this sense of what we couldn't conceive of before as happening.
Thanks, James. Now, I think we're drawing very much towards the end. Oh, sorry, in the middle there, and I think that might be it for our audience.
Okay, I think James has almost anticipated my question, but I just wanted to remind Michael of another bushfire cartoon of two people standing on a hill looking at their house burning down, and she turns to him and says, "Don't just stand there, go and save the anti-terror fridge magnet." James, your situation is unusual, but it's almost a metaphor for a wider society. You have a property where you've set aside several thousand hectares of bushland, which you manage for nature, and you also farm several thousand hectares of land. And as a country, we sort of do that. We set aside land for parks, national parks, conservation areas and so forth. And then the rest of it, I guess you could say, I don't want this to sound too negative, but we exploit it. But I've heard you talk before about the need for a cultural change. Instead of solving problems by draining wetlands or building dams or putting out fires and so forth, there needs to be a change where we try and learn to live more with nature rather than mastering nature. And I think that does come back to the comment you made just a few moments ago. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Thanks very much, please.
I think we still occupy this continent as if it were unknown. I think that we do not understand the landscape processes of our continent. I think that we should teach evolution at school as the beginning of history. Then we can put our own lives, our own brief tenure here into some type of perspective. But I think if we are making major decisions about the Murray, let's say as an example, and we don't relate those decisions to an understanding of the landscape processes of our continent, inevitably those decisions will be extremely lacking.
Thanks, James. Thank you very much. Look, we're going to draw this to a close now, but before I do, I'm just going to give each of the panel members an opportunity for a final word. So, Sophie, I'm going to start with you.
I'm actually going to refer to one of Michael's cartoons, which shows someone watching a television of a sunrise, and the sunrise is out their window. You know, what drives me is purely that I think we all need to make a difference, and we all have a sphere of influence. And so if we already have that connection with nature that is part of us and an integral part of us, we all are in contact with people that haven't got that connection. And so I feel strongly motivated that we can all make a difference. And if we, you know, what's that, each one reach one, if you know, whether it's the child down your street that has parents that don't understand the importance of nature, or whether it's your grandchild, or whether it's just a friend that's never, you know, grown a veggie for the first time, we can all make a difference. And just being part of nature and interacting it, you'll get that soul connection.
Thanks, Sophie. James.
I think I've said enough already. That's my view. Let me say that plants made our world. We must respect plants. Yeah. We wouldn't have oxygen, we wouldn't have anything without plants. Plants made our soil, plants made the life that we live. Maybe I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, James. Michael.
I was just listening to you, James, before about, you know, rethinking the way we use this land. Do you think the politician, the federal, does our Prime Minister understand that sort of thing? Because ultimately, I'm not here to knock the Prime Minister, but ultimately, it's such a despairing thing to see a Prime Minister sort of more or less quote the Old Testament, Genesis, and say that, look, it's there for our use to do with as we please. That's what it's there for humans, this human-centric view. So I'm always caught, and while we sit in company in a little ecosystem here tonight, probably in accord and with some reverence and love of nature, but how different it can be in the halls of power and privilege where the legislation is made. That's what I find at this point in my life rather causes me a lot of despair and sadness, that this division in the way we see it. And what you just said reminded me of that. What would the Prime Minister say to that? I wonder, I don't know. But it's a continuing source of sadness, and when we think of war, we think of humans being killed or their buildings, but it's nature that is suffering so horribly in those regions. It's devastating what depleted uranium will do to the soil, etc., etc., and all those gloomy things. So that is a question that burns at me of what can be done with what's left, and apart from just love it.
Thanks, Michael. No. I was actually he'd taken me to another place because, and I will finish with this. I'd written down the word salve, S-A-L-V-E, and the notion that you can find an ointment that you can put on that will relieve the pain, if you like. And in a dark time, when I was struggling.
Sorry, Alan.
A duck time. Yeah. In a dark time, to survive my world, somebody said to me, what you need to do is when you walk in the morning with your Jack Russell, you need to go through this little meditation. And the meditation was, can you feel something? Can you hear something? Can you see something? And then the next step of the meditation is, what are the two things that you can hear? What are the two things that you can feel? What are the two things that you can see? And then what are the three things and the three things? And I walk out in the bush, and all of a sudden I'm somewhere else. The two and the three things are the bird song that you talk about, or the things I see are the trees or the shadows or the something on the cloud or whatever. And what you feel is the wind or the something, the temperature, and that connection is the salve. It is the thing that where I can find the peace. So my response to Michael is, yes, there is despair. There is this despair, and I suffer it every day because I have to deal with that daily. And yet I see the other side, this incredible delight that can give you that relief and that salvation, if you like, salvation. So it gives me enormous pleasure to thank Sophie, James and Michael for giving us your time. It's a wonderful way to conclude this series, having three delightful people, three very good friends. It's been a delight. So thank you very much for tonight.
Thank you.
And the other thing I need to do is to thank the people that helped put this together. So Ash Baghurst and her team do a splendid job. Ash, wherever you are, thanks very much. To the guys on the audio, again, thank you for what you do, really appreciate that. And last but not least, to the audience that has been pretty faithful over a long period of time, and you've kept coming back for a bit of fun, and I think you do get some enjoyment out of this. There is some pleasure here as well, and a bit of insight. So thanks to you for being a good audience. Cheers. Joy.